I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime Magazine. I'm here today with Gordon Lawson, CEO at Conceal, provider of an intelligence-grade zero trust technology that protects companies of all sizes from malware and ransomware. To learn more about our sponsor Conceal, visit conceal.io. Also joining us is Colonel Candace E. Frost, a lifelong advocate for mentoring and leadership development. She is currently a director for the Army G2 within the headquarters, Department of the Army. To learn more about Colonel Frost, visit colonelcandid.com. That's Colonel, CANDID.com. Welcome, Colonel Frost and Gordon. Great to have you both with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Great, you're back, Steve. Thanks.
So, Colonel Frost, to get started, I learned about you on your website. You have a great brand. I want you to tell us a little bit about that and about your background. You had some great podcasts that I listened to, articles. Who is this? I'm looking at the Colonel Candace brand and I loved it and, reached out to you.
Well, thanks very much. I actually started the Colonel Candid idea when I was starting to go through transition from the military. I was an active duty Army officer for 25 years and leaned into a friend of mine and said, I know a lot about many things, but I don't know that much about business. So she said, why don't you just start your own consulting business? So I said, all right, let's try it. And lo and behold, I started doing a little bit of writing on the side, really focused on both mentorship and leadership, and started leaning into, hey, there are plenty of people that have great stories to tell. And I had so many wonderful conversations and mentorship sessions that I just figured I'd bring them on and start my own podcast. So went in that direction and have enjoyed kind of the growth of the ability to tell a story and kind of get the message out and move that along in the cyber world now.
So I'm following you now, and I recently saw a post. You're obviously connected to some great people in our industry, and one of them was Jen Easterly, director of CISA. She was named as our Cybersecurity Person of the Year. We had her on our podcast. She's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was incredibly fortunate to have several chances to get to speak with and really just be around Director Easterly and the work that she's done. We're both fortunate to come from the military intelligence field in our background. Most recently, they had a gathering of women at West Point, and she was the keynote speaker one day. She really spoke about the importance of cybersecurity. What I loved was how she can turn any message into a truly purposeful and meaningful way to connect with an audience. And what she really started was talking about West Point. She says, this place gets in your blood. And I kind of think about that in the way security has kind of infused itself into so much of what we do and why it's so incredibly important. So the messages that she puts out there, whether, when she talks about multi-factor authentication, it's more than a password, or she talks about really looking at different ways that we can develop security procedures, baking it in. I mean, it's just, she's very innovative in the way that she crafts a message, especially when we look at defense as the new offense and comparing it to how you play soccer or lacrosse. I think that's just a wonderful way that she has really opened up the aperture of people that get into this field. And I really love her drive and the way that she's moved CISA forward into hiring more people and bringing a larger swath of America to the table to understand how important our security is.
So when I gather with people like yourself, Colonel Frost and Gordon, and, we talk about Director Easterly, you get excited because these are people at the top of our field. But then again, the reality is we just don't have nearly enough people fighting this fight. Gordon, we've discussed this before. Maybe you could put it in perspective for us. I don't want to be all gloom and doom, but at the same time, to fight the fight, we have to be real about it, and we need many more people.
Right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Very kind of you to invite a former naval officer, Naval Academy grad on with Army Colonel. So it was a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. So it's a big challenge, Steve. I think it's absolutely a national security challenge. I think the latest numbers, and you guys are on top of these, is 4 million jobs that are open in the cyber field. And I think the other piece of it too is that we need to continue to encourage things like B-sides and hackathons and all the things, not just at the university level, but at the high school level as well, and getting young people involved and excited about it. But it definitely it's a large challenge. And I also will say, I think there's a lot of misconceptions. As you know, we're based here in Augusta, Georgia. It's the second largest concentration of military cyber in the United States. And we still have challenges recruiting off the base here. We can recruit in the community really well, but I think there's misconceptions that you have to be kind of a hardcore coder in order to get into this field. And that's simply not true. There's lots of roles within cyber that are very important. And I think we need to do a better job of educating the broader community about this.
So Colonel Frost, out of the numbers that Gordon just cited, here in the US, we have over 700,000 unfilled cybersecurity positions. I'm curious, what do you hear now circulating in the private sector since you've moved on from the Army? What's your perspective? How hard is it for, the private sector? Do you think we can motivate, more people to get into this field, possibly crossovers, people who are retiring, leaving the military to think about, joining us?
I think there's a great effort kind of put forth by Craig Newmark, and he has put a lot of kind of money where his mouth is. He's a great philanthropist, but he has started to dedicate himself and his philanthropic efforts of bringing more people from military families and communities and veteran service members into this field. So I see things like that, and it really starts to click that people understand we come pre-baked. We from the military have this understanding of what the nation needs, what security means. But sometimes you're absolutely right. We don't necessarily come with the skills that some people who have been coding all of their life. I try and look at this as that, number one, we have to reduce the intimidation factor of it. We are all learning in this field, and no one is a subject matter expert. I think that's the most innovative part of being a part of cybersecurity, is that something new is going to face us every single day. So as people enter this field, we do need a tremendous amount of mentoring and then also sponsoring people into jobs. We have to help people to write the job requisitions as well. And the fact that when they'll say, hey, it's an entry-level job, but you have to have 10 years of experience, it just doesn't make sense. So I think there's a dual factor of this. And then the last thing is we can't be afraid of technology. We can't solve this problem alone as a people problem. It's got to be a multi-pronged approach with respect to different tools are going to have to get better at doing work that just the mundaneness of what some cyber people do. We've got to be able to speed it up much faster and really get humans in the loop of where only they can be to make decisions. And I think, the advent of AI is really going to transform so much of what we do in a good and a bad way. There's two sides to this coin. But I do believe as we've kind of seen a younger generation get excited about the changes in technology, having them think about security will also come along with that. And that's those are the things that I've spoken with people about recently is understanding both sides of this and how they can be proactive and really securing themselves, their own data, who they are, their identity, and then, kind of applying it as a concentric circle, their family, their community, their state, and their nation.
So I'm glad to hear you bring up Craig. Not a lot of people realize how active he is in the cybersecurity field. He's given so much. In fact, the year before Director Easterly, he was our cybersecurity person of the year, and Craig has come on with us, I think 3 or 4 times, and he's very funny because each time he says he's too busy, and then I tell him, well, this person came on and mentioned you, so you have to come back on. So now I'm going to tell him we had Colonel Frost on with us, and she mentioned you, so it'll be because of you that he's back on with us again.
Well, that's fantastic. He just held a great event here in Washington, D.C. that was just amazing. A diverse group of people that he can bring together. It's pretty awesome.
And did he call himself a nerd? Because I know
yes,
he always
did.
And he is the ultimate nerd, but I say that with great affection, and he's so authentic. So Gordon, I want to ask you about women in cybersecurity, and this is a good segue because a lot of the money that Craig has so graciously given has been around women in cybersecurity. He's sponsored WESIS and other organizations. It's just been a lot of giving in that area. You and I have talked about women in cyber. In fact, I believe on our last episode, we talked about that. You've been in the industry for a while. I think you're familiar with some of the people. We've filmed with Diane Janicek, who was the head of the National Cryptologic School. She was the training director there, and she was so kind to open up the NSA to us when we filmed the documentary. But Gordon, what are you seeing, over the past decade? Are we moving the ball forward? Are we getting more women involved in our field?
I know you're going to ask the guy this question, but from my perspective, Steve, I think we're doing some good work here. I wish I could open my door in the office and show you. I was talking to our VP of HR this morning. I think we are at 50-50 with our male, female in our company right now, which is awesome. Just doing some amazing work there. And then, I know before we got on, we were talking about college tours, and I had was with my son at Carnegie Mellon this past week. They're at 50-50 from an enrollment perspective at the #1 cybersecurity school university in the country. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of encouragement here to make sure we have a really diverse, not just male, female, but diversity across the board. And I think we're doing a great job with that here in Augusta, but a lot of work to be done there to encourage it. And once again, I would also go back to saying, you don't need to be a computer science major. We have some really strong history majors. We have folks that don't have college degrees. We have it across the spectrum here where the core skills can be taught. You don't necessarily need to be on the software development side. You can be on the sales side and have a little cursory knowledge of cyber and have an incredibly rewarding career. So we're trying to show all of those areas to folks to bring more people into the field.
Colonel Frost, I want to ask you about this. And, numbers don't always tell the whole story, so I don't want to get too caught up on numbers, but they do help frame things. About a decade ago, representation of women in our field was hovering around 10%, and now it's 25%. We're seeing those numbers tick up. I do want to put an asterisk next to that around some research we did in the Fortune 500. The CISOs were only about 17% women. So we have a ways to go on the leadership side, but are we moving in the right direction?
Absolutely. I think we're moving in the right direction, but it's like anything in life. If you can see it, you can be it. And so as women that are entering into this field, as they're starting to look left and right, and they're looking up the chain sometimes, even though so many organizations are trying to be matrixed or flat organizations, there's still a hierarchy. And when they look up and they can see someone, I want to aspire to be like this person, that's important. And knowing that 70% of the CISOs are women is awesome. But when we look at the Fortune 500 and the major companies, those are, larger and larger. I think that's even more important, is that people are kind of bringing them up. That's a big part of sponsorship, and that growing the rest of the field is incredibly important. I love the fact that so many STEM organizations are reaching down even into middle school and high school now, kind of starting this dedication and devotion to this field much earlier. But we've got this bubble that's really in the next even 5 years headed our way in higher education, and that's a decreased enrollment. Those jobs, especially at the executive level, usually have kind of higher levels of education, whether they're at the master's or PhD level. And that's something of concern to me right now, is that we've just got to continue to encourage people to pursue education and higher degrees, because that's how we get more people into those executive roles. And I love the point Gordon just made. It doesn't always have to start with a computer science person and that field itself. There are plenty of people that understand economics, finance, or even just business roles that can really get engaged into this route, and even the legal field. I think there are just so many parts to play in cybersecurity that we've got to show people what a big tent it is, and their skills are needed here as well.
So the Girl Scouts of the USA launched a program. I think it was around 2017. Sylvia Acevedo, a rocket science former CEO of the Girl Scouts of the USA, is a real pioneer in our industry. Today, we have about 200,000 girls who have earned badges, my daughter being one of them. So, that's really exciting. What else can we do? What else should we be doing? Because honestly, for my daughter, and I think this is true for a lot of other kids, there's not a whole lot of talk about computer science or, cyber, at least not in middle school. And even, when my other daughters and son have been in high school, not a lot really, not a lot of exposure.
I think some areas, it's kind of an all hands approach, right? We understand social media. And so how do we make that an aspect of, where does development or where does security and all of these different pieces play a part. We started, and I was very fortunate. My daughter went to nationals in debate, and her debate topic this year was on AI and education. Was it positive for schools to be able to use this? All of a sudden, they had to understand cybersecurity, advanced technology, and these are future lawyers that are going to be in America. So those small steps are really important. It's not just the kids that are out there, really, in kind of heavy technical engineering aspects of it. But if we start to light that ignition in those small steps and bringing it as a part of our consciousness, what we talk about, what we do, they've got to be able to see that. If we understood how important NASA was to getting way back in the 50s and 60s and getting the space race forward, how do we excite that with our kids right now? I think that's an aspect that tech companies can do, and we can start to see that moving forward. It just can't be contained, though, on both of our coasts. And that's another area that I'm really encouraged to see places like Austin, Texas, really grow and dive into this. Schools in Indiana, Ohio, other schools in the Midwest, I've really seen kind of grow and lean very far forward into this. And it's just incredibly encouraging. We just have to kind of, push it down all the way, starting at the middle school level and up. But I really am excited to see all the growth that the Girl Scouts of America have achieved in a short period of time.
Well, you have a great message, Colonel Frost, so we're definitely going to bring you on for another episode, that's more focused in that area because, you're a great role model and, we need to connect with parents. They need to understand this too, because let's face it, the kids, are always going to go back to their parents and, we don't want them to have just a blank stare on their face and not be able to participate in the conversation. So, Gordon, we can't leave this conversation today having Colonel Frost on with us without touching on national security and cybersecurity. So, any thoughts? You and I, chat about that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think from my perspective, just as we talk to some of the biggest clients in the world and also the biggest MSSPs, MDR providers in the world, and just the dynamic nature of this threat right now, whether it's nation state or nation state sponsored criminal gangs, Steve, and we used to see a domain had been taken over and there's a fake email address. Now we're seeing real email addresses being taken over with very weaponized URLs embedded, very weaponized credential theft embedded. Training is, from our perspective, is not enough anymore. There has to be, preventative layers here. We have to be able to protect employees. We know it's going to make it through perimeter defenses. And I think that's the thing that concerns us, is that this is getting more and more sophisticated. And with AI now and the ability to do deep fakes, it's become as much a psychological problem and tapping into people's psychology and what they're going to fall for as it is a cyber problem. So we're fighting the battle on multiple fronts, and then throw that to the mix of smaller companies or municipalities that don't have huge budgets. We have a large problem on our hands, and we got to continue to fight this very effectively and aggressively.
So, Colonel Frost, before you leave us today, how concerned are you and optimistic maybe, around cybersecurity and national security?
So the good news is I've had the true fortune to kind of peek behind the curtain in the roles that I've had, and to see the dedication and absolute enormity of the number of people that are kind of standing watch to protect our nation is just, it's jaw-dropping and it's really phenomenal. But there just aren't enough. And there just aren't enough people to cover the huge swath of this environment itself. I'd love to compare it. We talk about kill chains, but we really need to look at it more like an actual physical web. And when one small part, one company, NotPetya is a great example of when that perturbation happened there, just the expansion of the entire web, where it impacted. I am concerned that the rapid rate of technology, which is incredibly fun to watch, and the innovation that's occurring not only in America, but a lot of countries that are friendly with us, goes faster and faster. The biggest concern I have is that we also have people that in the security world that are keeping pace. We're going to face brand new aspects, new things. I always say the 2024 election, it really is going to be rather interesting. We've seen just small snippets of deep fakes, and as that starts to get better and better, we're going to see massive issues with that. But the counter to that is there are great innovative companies that are already starting to poke the finger and say, no, that's real, that's authentic, and that's not. What would really be harmful to me, though, is that we start to lose trust in our institutions. And that's an area that national security, it's a bedrock. We need the trust and confidence of America and the citizens that actually allow us to serve. And so in that aspect, I would say participation is incredibly important, even if it's not in the cyber field at all, but participation in our government as well is incredibly important, because we all play a part of national security through voting, through helping out our critical infrastructure, staying safe ourselves with multi-factor authentication, consistently updating your own computer, doing auto updates, little tiny things. All of those things can kind of have a snowball effect and keep our nation safer.
I'm going to be completely transparent here, Colonel Frost, and fish you and ask you if you'll come back on with us because we've touched on so many things. First time you've been on with us, and maybe look ahead to 2024, talk about ChatGPT and some other things that are trending.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Let's make it a date.
Okay, great. And Gordon, we'll be catching up with you again shortly. Thank you for coming on again.
Sounds great. Pleasure to be with you both.
I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime Magazine. This interview is sponsored by Conceal, provider of an intelligence-grade zero trust technology that protects global companies of all sizes from malware and ransomware. To learn more, visit conceal.io. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.